Hello, Andrea Tarka White. I am so thrilled to have you here. I'm Cynthia Myers-Morrison, and we are just delighted to have you have the opportunity to share your story and your child's story with us. Do I have your permission to use this document, the video, in a couple of different resources for
Yes,
people? Thank
yes,
you. Thank
absolutely.
you. Wonderful. So, would you give us your business email so that if people want to reach you, that they know how, and we'll give that information again at the very end, but that will get it started. And
Yeah.
then to tell us something about yourself and your 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 story of your very young child, an infant, up through 5 years old, almost
Mhm.
five, and what things you have found out about food allergies and how those look related to food addiction and what we call food addiction in adults, and in your
Yeah.
child we're calling food allergies. So please
Yeah.
give us your business email.
So my email is hello@useyourpintuition.com. It's USEYOURPINTUITION.com, like intuition with a P. And yeah, you're welcome. The story is, so my son, my first child, he because he was our first, like we didn't really know what we were doing, and um there's a lot of like fumbling in the beginning, but right from the get-go, he had some stuff that I thought didn't seem normal. So he was a terrible sleeper, just horrible. And what I mean by that is he would just scream like all night long, and not all night, but 2 or 3 hours at a time, which is a long time. And I remember my mom telling me about my brother when he was a baby and how he had colic and how this was a thing. And I heard about colic, and I had read about, people saying if you were breastfeeding and if you stopped eating gluten and stopped eating dairy, it might help with colic. I didn't really do that part, but I thought about it. It registered. And and then his poop was weird. Like he would be constipated one minute and then diarrhea the next, and there was blood in his stool. And then it just, stuff that didn't seem normal to me. And we talked to our pediatrician, and we were assured that all of this was completely normal, completely normal. Um, as long as he's going at some point, that's fine. And then after, so that was the very early days, like the first couple months. And then maybe till he was 3 months. And then he started developing, he was getting sick a lot. So he kind of was always congested, which wasn't helping with the sleep. He was still not sleeping great. And then he started, I think it was when he was between 6 months and 1 year. I stopped breastfeeding at 6 months, and we switched to formula. And I tried to put him on non-dairy formula pretty quickly to see if that would change things. I think it helped a little bit, but he was also eating food. So now he was eating eggs with cheese and biscuits and, toddler foods, I'll say, just American foods of whatever we had around. And he started wheezing. And so now, in addition to having alternating diarrhea, constipation, not being able to sleep, now he's stuffed up all the time. The stuffed up is turning into getting sick all the time and being stuffed all the time. And now he's starting to develop asthma. And he was about a year old when that happened. And then he started getting this rash everywhere. First it was a diaper rash, then it was on his legs and his knees, and then it was on his face, and it was just bright red, hard skin. And the pediatrician said that it was from the wind. It was like chapped, so we could put some Aquifer on it, it would be fine. The diaper rash, we'd put on triple paste, we'd put on the one for athlete's foot, whatever that one was. We'd go through all these things. And meanwhile, he's a delightful baby, just amazing, and a nightmare at night, just awful, just so awful. And so much fighting between my husband and I. We're trying to sleep train him. My husband's saying, let him cry. I'm like, he's in pain. And so we fought a lot. And of course, it's our first child. So it just was really, really hard because I felt like something was wrong. I'm an acupuncturist by trade. So my perspective of what is normal in a body, I feel like is different from maybe a general practitioner's standpoint. Like I feel like when I go to the doctor and I say something, they say that's normal. I think what they mean is that's common, which I think is very different than normal. So to me, it just felt like something was wrong. Like he's not crying because he misses me. Maybe he misses me, but he's also crying because he's in agony. Like he's tensing his muscles and he's bucking and he's twisting. And even if I'm holding him, he can't get comfortable and he's just screaming and screaming and screaming. And then he's exhausted and then all this stuff. So it's kind of a cycle, right? Happiest little boy, just also progressively things are getting, it's just, I'm having that like that little tinkly spider sense feeling going on. They tried to put him on albuterol when he was, I think, a year and a half. And I was like, no, we're not, why? And they're like, it's not good for him to not to have that wheezing. I'm like, sure, can't we try something else first? Like, doesn't that seem a little extreme to put a 18-month-old on steroids? And then I was later kind of chastised by the practice for not doing that. They're like, oh, is he taking his albuterol? I was like, no, he's not. And he won't unless something's really bad. So it was getting worse up until like the skin stuff was getting worse. The breathing stuff was getting worse. He was literally sick all the time. And they told me, oh, that's because he's in daycare. Like they had the pediatrician and everyone had like a reason for everything. And the reason was always something that had nothing to do with what he was eating at all. Nothing at all. It was how we were treating him. It was the fact that he was in daycare. It was just, this is the way it is kind of stuff. And at 2, I really liked our pediatrician. It wasn't her fault. I really, really liked her. She listened to us. I felt like we were a team. At 2, I said, can we try and take him off dairy? Like, I really feel like he's worse with dairy. My husband is lactose intolerant. Oh, and then a little background about me. I am now 42. And when I was, I think, 18 or 19 is when I started making the connection with me that when I eat sugar, I go insane. Like I just have all kinds of mental health issues that with the consumption of sugar, like I get depressed, suicidal, anxious, agoraphobic, panic attacks, the whole thing. And it wasn't until college that I made the connection between sugar. And it wasn't until probably 10 years after that that I had done a lot of work to kind of shift processed sugar out of my diet. And I also work with addiction. So I have a lot of addiction in my life, my family and people that I know, and I work at a rehab. So I have this background of addiction and also this background of like, hey, food really affects me. And so I was saying to the doctors, like, let's try some food stuff. Like maybe let's try cutting out dairy. And we did cut out dairy and it helped. It definitely helped. It didn't make everything better, but it helped. Like, I feel like his stomach was a little more settled. We were still eating gluten. We were still eating sugar. We were still eating all kinds of stuff, but the dairy helped. And then that was when he turned 2. And then at 2.5, the thing started to get worse with his breathing. He was still sick all the time. He was congested all the time. And it started in November. It was the week of Thanksgiving, the week before Thanksgiving. He came home from school with a fever. He was diagnosed with a double ear infection and pneumonia. We put him on whatever the antibiotics they gave us were. He started getting worse. So I think we started them on, he was sick. I think we started him on the antibiotics on Friday. By Saturday, it was worse. Sunday, he was worse. By Monday night, or no, it was Tuesday night, he could barely breathe, but he also like hadn't slept. And the nurse was like, you need to take him to the ER. And I was like, he just needs to sleep. So I didn't take him to the ER. And I called the next morning and she said, didn't I tell you to take him to the ER? I said, yes, you did. She said, well, now it's time. So we went to the ER and he got checked in. None of his, it was antibiotic resistant pneumonia and ear infection. So I might cry at this point, but it's hard. It's hard when you have a little kid and you're in the hospital. So, and we had gone to oh, sorry, Cynthia, go
Andrea,
ahead.
it is so hard, and I so appreciate your sharing in the way that you are, because other parents need to hear this. They
Yeah.
truly do. and your share makes a difference. And I'm so appreciative of what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we know he lived through it. That's
He
a good
totally
part.
lived through it. He's awesome. He's great. It's just scary, I think. And I have a lot of respect for any parent doing their best out there. We all and like when your kid is sick, it's a different kind of powerless feeling, where it's like this helpless, vulnerable, fear-based, oh my gosh, there's all these things. So I went to the hospital. Before they gave him a chest x-ray, the doctor was really great. She's like, here's the thing. She listened to his lungs. She said, I can guarantee you if he has pneumonia, which he has pneumonia, I'm telling you based on how he sounds, we're going to give him a chest x-ray. If he has pneumonia, you're going to have to stay the night. And I was like, all right, fine. So we knew what was coming, which was helpful. They put him on an IV antibiotic. He'd never had an IV before. And they had like a shield on top of it, right? So that he wouldn't take it off. He was wheezing so bad that they were giving him a nebulizer like every however many minutes. They had him hooked up to oxygen. He was amazing through this whole thing. He was such a trooper. And this was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. So timing was pretty terrible. We are very fortunate and very blessed. The next day being Thanksgiving, we were discharged. We got to go home. We had a follow-up scheduled for Friday. Friends of mine who are amazing, like made us Thanksgiving dinner. They had leftovers, so they just brought it over. It's like, you guys are so incredible. So, and the family understood, like we didn't want to go anywhere. We just wanted to be home. So I took him to the doctor on Friday for his follow-up, and he flipped out, like all the trauma of being in the hospital and staying overnight. He did so well. He ripped his IV out in the middle of the night without meaning to. There was blood everywhere. We couldn't figure out what it was from. And then we realized the thing was gone. And he was so good about that when I took him to see the pediatrician on Friday, he was a screaming mess on the floor, just beside himself, actively in trauma. And the doctor's like trying to be cutesy with her toy on her stethoscope. And I was like, do what you need to do so we can go home. Like, stop it. Just do what you need to do. And then I was the end of November. And then 2 weeks later, he was still sick, just with a different kind of sick. He still had congestion. I think the pneumonia had cleared, probably the ear infection had cleared. And, but he was still congested because he's always congested. And then it was late. He also still hadn't been sleeping, and he had this cough. It was like this barking, horrible sounding cough. It sounded like croup. I think it was croup, actually. Now that I said it, it was that croup cough. It's just really scary sounding. And then he couldn't breathe. And when he was breathing, he was going, and like, that's scary. So then I called 911. Because he said, Mommy, I can't breathe. And I was like, I don't, okay. And the ambulance came. And when we went outside with, I didn't know this, but with Stridor, it's an inflammation of the windpipe, and a child's windpipe is like smaller than your finger. So if it gets even a little bit inflamed, they can't breathe. And what they told me later is when you bring them outside, this was the winter, so the cold air would kind of immediately help, and it did. But we still had to go to the hospital. Yes, isn't that crazy? So if there's like an inflammation there, good to know. That would have been helpful, while I was waiting for the ambulance, but still. They strapped him into the gurney with the bright lights in his face in the ambulance. So that was really hard. I personally believe in a higher power because I'm in recovery. And for me, what was really, really helpful, the first hospital visit, I was just having this conversation in my head with my higher power. And what I heard, I was like, I'm so upset. This is our first ER visit. I'm so upset. And what I heard distinctly was, it won't be your last. And for some reason, that made me feel so much better. And then the second time, I'm like, well, you were right. Here we are again. Not even a month later.
And that's so wonderful to know that it's not going to be your last at that moment, but maybe not the next one. It's like, oh no.
It was so silly. Yes. So he was fine. They gave him some medicine. He could breathe. Everything was okay. And then we had one more incident that was not breathing related. He like dropped something on his head and he had to get stitches. Like it was another like 4 weeks later. I'm like, you're kidding me with this. But he still wasn't better. Like he was still coughing. He was still congested. He was still not sleeping. And it was finally I think it was either after Christmas. His birthday's right before Christmas. So I think it was after his birthday, after Christmas. I was like, now we are listening to me, because this had been years. So he's now just turned 3. I'm an acupuncturist. I believe in all of these things. We're doing none of the things I believe in. Everyone's saying things that don't mesh at all with anything I know to be true in my heart and in my training. But I'm like, okay, I'll just go along. In the meantime, I actually took an acupuncturist pediatrics course because it was something I could do, right? And so we talk about that a lot in acupuncture. If you have an acupuncturist, especially if you're in California or some of the more medically progressive states, acupuncturists are well versed in, or can be well versed in, the treating of digestive issues, addictive issues, respiratory issues, and we know that they're all related. So I turned into Mama Bear, and I was like, all right, that we're doing this my way. I've done it your way for 3 years now. Now it's my turn. And you know, there's a little bit of force in that, but I was like, we're not doing dairy, we're not doing gluten. We're stopping all that. We still did sugar, but that we're still working on that. But so many things cleared up. So our community is amazing. So my aunt lives next door. She's a nurse. My best friend's mom lives down the street. She knows her friend's son went through the same thing. So she gave us a referral for a allergist and immunologist. I asked our pediatrician for a referral to an allergist. So I went to the person that was recommended. He was amazing. He asked, I think the intake was like an hour and a half long, and he asked all the right questions. When he breathes, does he breathe with his mouth open? Does he snore? Does he grind his teeth? And he said, every question I'm going to ask you is related to allergies. And just so you know. And I was like, he does grind his teeth. And he said, well, you know, in adults, when they grind their teeth, it's because they're stressed, but kids aren't stressed. He said, when they grind their teeth, it's because they're congested and they can't breathe. And that helps to break that up. And I was like, what? Oh my goodness. So any blood in his stool? Is like, yes, there's blood in his stool. They told me that was normal. It's not normal to have blood in your poop when you're not even 3. So it was really, really helpful. I felt really seen and heard by this man. He was incredible. And we set up a session to do a skin test because he was an allergist, right? So it was just the most amazing thing. He sang a little song. He drew a little grid on John's arm and put all the substances, and he tracked all the substances. And he said, based on this skin test, he's like, I'll tell you, there's not a reaction to gluten and dairy. He's like, but he's got a reaction to apples, oranges, mold. What was the other one? There was like grass, I think was one of them. He's like, if apples, probably pears, but you'll have to see about that one. And I was like, really, all of those things. So that's when we started making real progress. Then we started taking out the apples and the oranges and all the fruits. I mean, imagine a child without fruits. It's just kind of a thing. So, and then that's when kind of the fight begins. This is January after he turned 3. I think it took 6 months of me literally like fighting with my parents and my in-laws and daycare and my husband and everyone about whether or not this was a real thing. And I had already been fighting for over 2 years with the pediatrician about whether or not this was a real thing. So it's a long time of fighting and sticking to like, I just know that this is true. And this allergist, one of the reasons he was amazing, my husband asked, he said, well, if he says he's not allergic to gluten and dairy, does that mean we can start feeding it to him again? And I was like, I'm going to kill you. Like, no, he's for the first time can breathe. Like, we're not going to just give him the food again. I don't care what this person says. It's working. But I might think those things, but I also temper them. So I asked the doctor, I said, so this is my worst fear coming true. You telling me that he's not allergic to these things. And my husband asked, and so I think it's appropriate, does that mean we should start feeding it to him again? And the allergist said, he said, well, no, you've observed that's an anti-inflammatory diet. No gluten, no dairy is anti-inflammatory. You've observed that it's helped. What that means is we've shown through experience, through observation, that he has systemic inflammation and that the diet is helping with that systemic inflammation. Beautiful answer. I was so pleased with this answer. It's like, thank God. So I went back to our pediatrician. Gets better. It turns out my pediatrician knows this doctor and hates him, visibly, viscerally hates him. I've never seen a doctor kind of lose their cool. Like, it was bad. Like, she like wrote things in the chart that I later got a copy of, just like exclamation points and things. And I was like, oh goodness. So she was basically like, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And I was like, she's like, we don't recommend him. Is there a reason? When I asked for the referral, she said, is there a reason you are requesting him? And I said, because someone recommended him to me. She's like, all right. And then when I told her all the things he said, she's like, that's just not a thing we do anymore. And there's da 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 da. So she was very angry. I said, all right, well, all right. To be fair, I'll see your person. Who would you recommend? I went to the person she referred me to.
It was so generous.
I mean, it was very kind of me. It really was.
It was.
It was horrible. It was horrible. The way we treat children in doctor's offices, the way we treat adults in doctor's offices as well, right? But the way we treat children, like, it's unconscionable, however you say that word. And we did a skin test, very different. The doctor we saw, singing a little song, drawing a little thing, no big deal. When they did it, they said, okay, so, let him know it's going to be okay. It's not going to hurt. And I was like, okay, now restrain him. I'm like, why am I restraining him? If it's not going to hurt, why do I have to restrain him? So they made me lie to my child first. I restrained him. They pushed the thing on his back and they're like, oh, this doesn't hurt. It's a thing full of needles. It's like a piece of paper filled with needles, filled with substances that you're probably allergic to. And like, that's supposed to be okay. He's screaming, he's crying, they're charting as if nothing's happening, like they're charting the quadrants and the reactions. And then the doctor comes in, so I'm already unhappy. And the doctor comes in, and I've seen his back. I'm watching this happen. The previous doctor explained the whole procedure to me, so I knew exactly what they were doing. And with an allergy skin test, like people may or may not know, you do there's a positive and a negative, I don't remember the name of it, but it's what they're gauging it by. Like, if it's bigger than the positive response, then you're allergic. If it's not bigger than it, then you're not allergic. So if you have a reaction, but it's not that big, it's not really a reaction. It doesn't count. Control, that's what it is. They have a positive control and a negative control. And so after seeing his back, the doctor said he's not allergic to anything. It's no reaction to anything. And I said, okay, same question. All right, what you're telling me is my biggest fear come true, that he's actually doesn't have a problem with all of these substances. And I said, so what would you recommend? Would you recommend that this diet seems to have been working for him, no gluten, no dairy. Would you recommend we continue that or not? She said, well, I would hate to deprive him. And that word has come up in a bunch of with a bunch of people. I've heard that from other people saying, people have said, well, I wouldn't want to deprive them. And I was just it made me feel so good that other people had that experience, because I had such a reaction to that word. Oh, like, you don't want me to deprive him of like abdominal pain and insomnia? Like, you'd rather that than, so it's just, I with all of this whole story, a lot of it was feeling completely gaslighted, like I was crazy because there's something visibly wrong with my child's health and I'm being told that's not true. And then having to like get support and stay strong for the fact that I know that something's wrong, and so much compassion for us as a country and the world that like, we think that's normal. Medically speaking, that it's so common that it's considered normal that kids can't breathe. And that's unacceptable to me as a practitioner. So this has inspired me to do this work with, I treat a lot of moms, talking to a lot of moms about diet and about things like that. And it's hard. We go, I hate birthday parties. I hate them. They're nothing but pizza and ice cream and screaming children. And it's always, why can't we eat this? And we want this. And And my husband's like, I feel so bad for him. I'm like, I know, but it's temporary discomfort about saying no to something, as opposed to just what happens when he gets it in his system. Like when he eats these things now, he instantly, he has eczema, so his skin instantly turns red, and he instantly gets congested. Like it's within a half an hour congestion. Can't breathe through his nose anymore. He has a terrible time sleeping. He usually has abdominal pain that evening. The next day, he has trouble eating because his digestion is all messed up. He typically tends towards constipation these days, so he won't be able to poop for a little while. It takes him 2 or 3 days to get back on track after eating one thing he's not supposed to. And it's just not worth it to me personally. So he's now almost 5. He's gonna be 5. And we've been talking a lot about this. Like the daycare is pretty good now, about not giving him things that they shouldn't. And they try to warn me, like when there's a birthday or something, so I can bring in a snack for him. Like, oh, so-and-so is bringing pizza, so I'll just bring like a cauliflower crust thing with some sauce and everything. And we do a lot of, like, I'll say fake cheese and things like that at this point. So the kind of the fallout of this is that he's now almost 5. He still doesn't sleep well. He is a super picky eater, which was another question of the allergist. Is he really picky? He is. Kids with food issues tend to be really picky. He'll eat like 3 things. He has 3 things that he's comfortable eating. We're working on vegetables. They're not one of the 3 things. And he can't eat fruits, so we're not doing great with the food groups. But you know, one day at a time with that. But he knows enough. Like he'll talk about him and his class friends, and about how, what he says is, well, because I make him all his food. So I make crackers, and I make, I used to make bread. I don't make bread anymore. I used to make gluten-free bread, delicious, but now it's like, even that's a whole thing. But I'll make like alternate versions for them. And apparently what his teachers say is that his class friends can't have his snacks because they're not good for them. And I'm like, actually, I think they would probably be better for them. But if that's what you have to say, that's fine. That's fine. Sorry, I'm just gonna move because the sun's right there. But he gets it that like he's got his food and like he can't quite eat what other people eat. And generally we swap things. So like if he gets candy for something, we'll like swap it out for something else. Usually at this point, other candy, but just food allergen friendly candy. He is definitely addicted to sugar. It's one of the 2 things that he eats is the sugar. So it's sugar and meat essentially. And occasionally he'll have carrots. Carrots are the one vegetable we've been working on. But the other thing the pediatrician said with his constipation, they told us to give him apple juice and not water. I didn't feed him water until he was probably 2 years old. So he only got water in his formula. I started watering down his juice pretty fast because it's really sweet and intense. But because of that, he is totally addicted to the sugary drinks. We've gotten him off of juice, but now he is addicted to chocolate almond milk. So we're working on that now too. And it's, I don't want to make it sound like he's fine. He's totally fine. He is in great, amazing shape. He looks great. He kind of had a problem with growing for a while because I don't think he was getting like enough of anything, like just being not absorbing stuff for so long. So he's on the smaller side, but he's growing now that we've like got stuff out of the way. But he's totally great. It's just like as a mom and as parents, but as a mom, like I want the best for my child. Of course, we all do. And like, I know how much I suffered. I want to say unnecessarily. Of course, I'm grateful for it now because it gives me the perspective that I have. It makes me the person that I am. I can understand what's going on because of that. That's why I work with recovery, because I totally feel like I get it. I get the obsession. I get the compulsion. I get the just insane negative self-talk and the cravings and all that. And I was so grateful to discover that sugar addiction was a thing. I was like, yes, that's what I have. I've been saying that for so long. in that, but it's a real thing.
It is a
So,
real thing. It is a real thing. And
right.
abstinence from the trigger foods and behaviors is the only solution. Moderation does not work with alcoholics, addicts of any ilk.
Yes.
So it really is a real thing. Thank you.
And yes, I can totally relate. And it's interesting too, how like so many recognize that addiction is a thing. Oh, sorry.
Oh, someone was
Yeah.
coming in. I wanted to mute. Yeah. Go ahead.
So many people still don't acknowledge that addiction is a thing in general. And then like food addiction is now like a whole other thing that people, it's just hard. So the way I describe addiction, because there's such a stigma around it, I just describe it as it's when, for me, my addiction to sugar is when I have even a taste, even that just tiny sweet taste, it initiates a cascade of thoughts where I can't stop thinking about eating it. Even if I don't eat it, I can't stop thinking about it. I can't stop having a conversation in my mind about whether I should eat it or shouldn't eat it, why I should eat it, why I shouldn't eat it, how I'm really not going to have any, but I really want some, but I really shouldn't. And it just turns into this racing, incessant mental, exhaustive space with just even the thought, actually, not even a taste, just even the thought of it. And that to me is what addiction is. It's this consumption of desire for this thing that puts everything else out of my mind. And I know what happens to me when I eat sugar, but I do it anyway. And that's also the part that's addiction, is like, I know it's bad for me. I know if I do it, I'm going to get sick. I'm going to get depressed. I'm going to be angry. I'm going to scream at the people I love. I'm going to not want to get out of bed. All of the things, everything's going to hurt. I'm going to get headaches and joint pain and blah, 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 all the things. I know this, but I'm still going to want to eat it. And once I eat it, I'm still going to want to eat more. So that to me is addiction. It's when like, it's not that people who are addicts don't know, they know. It's just that it's a biological thing that you can't stop once you start. so
You
anyway,
are definitely describing it well, very well.
right.
So let me ask a few questions in
Yes.
terms of how um, how has your child's problems with food,
Mhm.
how has that interacted with your own? You've said some things about it. What have you and your husband done or changed
Yeah.
in your own eating?
Yeah. So in the beginning, we were trying to just give him stuff. And I was like, I can't do this. I can't eat cheese in front of him. That's not fair. So I decided to go gluten-free, dairy-free also. But my husband's like, I'm not giving up gluten. Like, why would I do that? That's crazy. So he still does eat gluten. We don't keep dairy in the house anymore, because after I stopped eating it, I used to keep like a little cheese to throw on stuff for my husband, but it would just start going bad because then I just really wouldn't use it.
Mhm.
So I was like, this is just a waste of money. And my husband got used to not eating it, so he didn't really miss it. And then when we would go out with just the two of us, and we would have like a date night or something, we might indulge in like gluten or dairy, but we wouldn't keep it in the house.
Mhm.
And so for me, it's made a huge difference especially in terms of my sugar addiction. Like I have much less trouble saying no when I'm not eating gluten as well. And if I do slip up, because I'm not great on I haven't made it a month without sugar in a really long time. Right now, I committed to being sugar free as of October 16th. So I'm in like the 3-week mark. We'll see if I make it.
Yay!
I know, right? It's very exciting.
Fabulous. Fabulous.
Well, I have a friend and we're doing it together, which is very helpful.
Mhm.
And so I was a vegetarian for a long time, but I was not a good vegetarian. Like I would eat like, ice cream and mac and cheese. That was like my version of being a vegetarian. So I gained a lot of weight and I was very depressed when I was a vegetarian. But I also learned how to cook vegetables when I was vegetarian. So when I reintroduced meat, I now could eat both. Whereas before I could only eat meat. And then as a vegetarian, I could only eat carbs. but started with the vegetables. And then when I went back to meat, then I started eating, the combos.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, meat is kind of essential. Like when I don't eat it, I have more cravings. And my husband's from the South, so he's happy with that decision. And so, and of course
Go
what
ahead.
was that?
I'm sorry.
Oh, just my son is also way into meat, so that works for him.
And there are people, I mean, there's so much about keto now, but there are people that have found that being way into meat with just a smaller amount of vegetables really does help for a number of different, both mental and physical problems. Georgia EDE, who is a psychiatrist, has written articles and collected articles that have to do with that process. So there are some things that are starting to be evident, and your story is certainly one that I hope will bring a lot more information into the floor. So what were the things prior to you seeing that? I mean, you said that this baby at 6 months old, you really knew there was something wrong.
Yeah,
so was there anything prior to that in your pregnancy, when in utero? Did you notice anything then?
Yes, I'm so glad you asked. There was one night I had ice cream for the first time. I hadn't had ice cream in a really long time. I think I was like 7 months pregnant or something. It was the weirdest experience. I was fine. He was a mess in my belly the night I ate ice cream. He was just kicking all over the place, moving all over the place, couldn't calm down. Like I'd never felt him before for hours that night. Maybe it was like 8 months, right? He was big. He was big enough that like it was obvious. And it was so strange how it was not me, but I could tell what distress he was in. And that was actually another thing that was making me think when all this was happening that maybe it was the dairy, because it seemed like he had such a huge reaction the one time I had ice cream ever. I was like, maybe it's the dairy. Like that would kind of make sense. So that was like another piece of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, both of my kids were very much themselves when they were in utero. So like my son hates acupuncture, and like he didn't like it when I got acupuncture when I was pregnant. Really didn't. And he doesn't like acupuncture now. Like he thinks it's terrible, which of course he does.
But your other child?
My other child, I have a daughter. She's 18 months old. I was really sick with her pregnancy, and I was really grumpy and angry about everything and everyone. And that's kind of her. She's like pretty moody, but not moody like bad. That's just her personality. She just doesn't like, it's hard to get her to smile. She'll just kind of look at you. And when she does smile, it's amazing, but she doesn't give those away. Like you have to earn one of them. But she's like, loved it when I would get acupuncture. She was fine. When she was born, she was just super chill. She's very like laid back, but suspicious, very suspicious.
Wow. Such a difference between the two. Does she eat differently or the same as your son?
She eats the same because the first week of her, like after she was born, I think I was eating like, I was in the hospital, so they were just making whatever. I think they put like cheese and butter in the eggs. Mm-hmm. And I think I had mac and cheese for my first meal because I was just very excited. And that was my favorite food. And she was kind of exhibiting the same sort of stuff. And I was like, I don't think this is going to work. Like, I think we need to. So we don't do gluten or dairy for her either. We don't do the same restrictions with fruits. My son also can't eat strawberries or pineapples. Mm-hmm. He can do peaches and blueberries and cantaloupe. That's sort of it as far as the fruit department. He can kind of do grapes, but they give him a bellyache. But I think just because they're grapes, not because he's allergic. Mm-hmm. And bananas kind of make him constipated. Mm-hmm. Which kind of that, even though it's not the same food allergy, the constipation sort of triggers some of the same symptoms. Mm-hmm. And then I think my daughter also might have a sensitivity to corn. So we're not like a corn-free house, but we're getting there as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So you're really paying attention to what their needs are and how they react to food, and what not only their physical reaction, but the emotional reactions as well.
Oh yeah, huge. Like when we stopped eating gluten and dairy with my son, he was so much calmer.
Mhm.
He was, I mean, he was 2 and like just turned 3, but like the tantrums were just like he threw a stool like down the stairs. Like it was just bad. And when we stopped that stuff, he was just so much more relaxed and
Mhm.
so much less angry. He was really angry before that, which I don't blame him. He wasn't sleeping. He felt like crap all the time. I would be angry too. So I get it.
Mhm.
But there was definitely like a mood shift where he had a lot less behavioral stuff when we took him off the gluten and the dairy for sure.
Fantastic. And
Yeah.
as far as his growth, do you think he's catching up to?
Yeah, he grew a lot this summer. I think he's still a little like he was at like 11th percentile or something, which that was pretty low. And
Mhm.
it was going down from
Mhm.
when he started eating solid food. That was the other thing. Um, that I was like, he's also like not growing great, which it could just be that he's a smaller dude. That's fine. But
Mhm.
it also seemed like he just wasn't getting what he was eating, like getting what he needed out of his food. So this summer, so he's almost 5, like his 4.5, he
Mhm.
kind of had a huge growth spurt. So he jumped up a few inches over, I think it was like an inch and a half over the summer. And I was like, what happened to you? So now he's almost 5 and now he's about the size of a 4-year-old, a little bit more. So I think yes, catching up. And we'll see what happens.
Mhm.
But
Mhm. And
so
as far as the first foods that you gave to your son, and did you do the same thing with your daughter?
oh no, she's totally different. She loves vegetables. She eats pretty much everything, which is amazing. Everything all the time, as opposed to him who eats like nothing. I was, I mean, I was so anal with him. I was making, steaming all of our own vegetables, making our own baby food, pureeing everything myself. And I think his first food was like zucchini or avocado or butternut squash or something. I was giving him like all organic, all like in season stuff. And I was like, look at me giving him the best food. And he was just getting worse and worse. I'm like, why is this not happening? So we did a lot of vegetables when he first started eating
Mhm.
solid foods.
Mhm.
Um, he would have vegetables like twice a day and he liked them too. He really liked like squashes and
Mhm.
Brussels sprouts. I think he ate Brussels sprouts.
Uh-huh.
Right, he ate all the things, but then he loved biscuits and jelly. We used to have biscuits and gravy because of the southern thing. Loved biscuits and jelly, and then he loved toast. And jelly was a big, jelly all over the face and in the
Yeah.
hair.
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
and ketchup. He loved ketchup, and then he turned into like a sauce fan. So he would just always just eat this, like he would just spoon ketchup into his mouth. I think it was I don't know when he stopped. I guess when I stopped pureeing things, he wasn't really into vegetables anymore. When they started to be like solid, he was more just like, not so interested in that. And then he also started putting maple syrup on everything. When he discovered maple syrup, then it was maple syrup on everything. Like he still to this day has maple syrup on his chicken nuggets and on his waffles. And again, I say to myself all the time, constantly, one day at a time, one day at a time.
So it is on your list
Oh,
of
absolutely.
things to remove.
Absolutely.
So
That's true.
in terms of future plans, maybe the maple syrup, um, what other things do you hope to change in the future?
I think so. We have like a list.
Mhm.
The first 2 things on our list is we're trying to get him to drink more water because
Mhm.
he's not great at that,
Mhm.
because we think that would help a lot if he was more hydrated. And we're trying to get him to eat any vegetable at all, anything, even like a piece of, you know, carrots are his go-to. That's fine. If he wants to eat carrots every day, I don't care. It's a
Okay.
vegetable.
Uh-huh.
So we're trying to just introduce the fact that like vegetables aren't bad. That's sort of so that we wanted to do more water and more vegetables first,
Mhm.
and then start to kind of cut down on the sugar. I've tried. I started making our own almond milk and making our own oat milk, and I know those are also not great because there's still the grains, but I figured it'd be better than like the store-bought stuff. He does not generally, if I make it, he doesn't like it. Like he's sort of in that age too.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, it's like, oh no, what did he say? He's like, I don't want any of that gross chocolate milk. I want the good
The
chocolate
good
milk.
chocolate milk. The
So
an item that a friend of mine whose children are all now grown, but she is a food addict, and she said that the only way that she could get her children to eat vegetables when they were young, and she was just starting with, food addiction and recovery, she said that what she did was to put artificial sweetener in them, which may not be the best thing, but in terms of transitioning from real hard stuff and maple syrup and things of that sort, that the
yeah.
sweetness was something that really engaged her children, so that then they would eat the vegetables. And then over the years, they've continued to eat the vegetables, even though she's weaned them off of the sweeteners. So I mean, there are many ways to alter a situation, that in experimentation, you have had many experiences in that. So I know you'll find some things that will work. Well, do you have some other things you'd like to say before we close?
I think just that if I kind of feel like mother's intuition is kind of like the best diagnostic technique. That's just my personal opinion as a mom. But I guess I just want to share, like, if you feel like something's off, it might be. And just like support groups are great. The thing that's helped me through all of this is friends and talking to other moms, complaining with other moms, texting in the middle of the night with other moms whose kids also can't sleep. That's been really helpful. And just finding communities like that, finding communities and people who have had similar experiences has really helped me. Like when I took my pediatrics course, I was like, see, it's a thing. It's a thing. It's right there. And so anytime I've found like a person to connect to, it's been like a weight that's been lifted. And then also just to like, no, you're not crazy. Like if someone's going through this with their child, like it's really stressful and it's really hard. And we're not crazy. Like, of course, there's a connection between what our kids eat and how they feel. Like, how could there not be? How could there not, like, with anybody, if we run off of food and we don't feel well, chances are there's something in there that's a little off. And also just like, I feel like I was really hard on myself and blamed myself for a lot of this. Still do, I think. Like, why didn't I do something sooner? I just took him to my acupuncturist like a month ago to get herbs. And I was like, why didn't I do that like 4 years ago? But so that's just another thing, just to like be easy on, like, I'm trying to be easier on myself because I tend to, like, again, coming from addiction, I tend to blame myself for everything, take my responsibility for everything, and be super judgmental with myself. And I know through recovery that none of those things are helpful. And
True.
So
the self-forgiveness is so important, that every one of us is doing the best that he or she can, the little ones as well as the adults. So the self-forgiveness, and as soon as you thought about going to the acupuncturist to get herbs, you did it.
Exactly. It happened when it needed to. Right.
That's right. So, well, we promised that they would have your email address again, and it's hello@useyourpintuition.com. HELLO@useyourpintuition.com. And I would really like to invite you to come back another time, so we get an update in a year, or maybe sooner, to find out what's happening next, not only with your children, but with you and your husband, and how those shifts are changing. So I celebrate you, and I am so thrilled that you came. Thank you so much for coming, Andrea Tarka White. Thank you.
You're welcome, Cynthia. Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you. You're a gift, truly a gift.